Hi guys, today I'm going to walk you through the steps for how to knit the Peekaboo T pattern. It is a really simple design made up of two T-shaped panels that are seamed together. There are no increases or decreases, so it's a great project for beginners. You'll start with some ribbing and then knit straight through the body, and then we will cast on some extra stitches on either end for the sleeves, and then the second panel will be knit the same way. And we will do a little clever seaming at the top to make these peekaboo shoulder slits, and seam right here at the top of the shoulders. And then we will seam under the arms and then along the sides. Okay. So I am using Lion Brand yarn 24/7 cotton. This is the color Mint. It is really soft. And I'm going to start with US 7 32-inch circular needles just for the ribbing, and then we'll switch to 8s for the body of the shirt. So I'm just going to start with a little swatch. You'll want to cast on as many stitches as the size your knitting calls for. I'll link to the pattern below if you haven't already found that. Zoom out just a little. So we're just going to long tail cast on however many stitches your size calls for. I'm just going to do about 20. So I have a little trick for how to determine how long to make your tail. So first what I do is I take the yarn and just wrap it around the needle about 10 times. So this is about how much yarn you'll need for 10 stitches. So I'm going to cast on 20, so I'm going to just hold that lengthwise, double it up. And this is about how much I would need for 20. And then I just go a little bit further. And I'm just going to leave that tail and make a slip knot. So I just kind of twist the yarn and pull the end through. And make a nice slip knot and then place that on my needle. Now for the long tail cast on, you'll have your tail facing you and your working yarn away from you. And I just put my thumb and index finger in between the two strands and then grab both strands with my other 3 fingers and make kind of a diamond like this. Then we will just bring our needle under this loop and around this loop and pull it through. And that's 2 stitches. The slip knot counts as the first stitch. And we'll just keep repeating this until you have all your stitches cast on. Under, bring this one through that loop. Under by the thumb and around this one. So I'm just going to cast on 20. And you don't want to cast on too tight. It's a nice even tension. Let's see how many we have here. 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 12, 14, 16, 18, 19, 20. Okay, and then we're just going to start the ribbing, which is just a knit 1, purl 1 rib. So I'm just going to knit that first stitch, purl, and keep repeating. Knit, purl. And you'll do this for as many rows as the size your knitting calls for. And then we will switch to larger needles. Once you finish knitting the ribbing of your shirt, you're going to switch to US 8 needles for the body. If you have a separate set of US 8 circulars, you can just start knitting onto those. I'm using an interchangeable set, so I'm just going to change my right tip to US 8, leave this one as a 7 for now until I get to the end of this next row, and then I'll change that tip to an 8 as well. These are Knit Picks interchangeable needles. They are my favorite and they've lasted for 10 years now, so highly recommend them. So I just changed that one to an 8. And now we're just going to knit across. We don't want to slip the first stitch or anything like that, just for the body. We will for the sleeves to keep the edges nice and neat, but since we'll be seaming the sides of the body, we don't want to slip any stitches. So I'm just going to knit across, knitting onto that 8 needle. And then I'm going to change my other needle to an 8. And then we're just going to purl across. So just purl this whole row. So we are working in stockinette stitch. So we will alternate knitting one row with purling one row for the rest of the body. So we'll just keep knitting and purling until the piece measures as long as the size your knitting calls for. And then we'll cast on a few extra stitches for the sleeves, and I'll show you how we do that next. So just keep plugging away, knit and purl. Once you've knit the majority of the body of your t-shirt, we'll be casting on extra stitches at each side for the sleeves. So I have a finished panel here, I'll show you. So we're just going to cast on extra stitches at each side and then continue knitting, and that will form our sleeves. So there are several different cast on methods that you can use. I like to use the cable cast on method. It just provides a nice sturdy edge, and I'll show you how to do that. So I just finished a right side row. So turning my work with the purl side facing, I have my yarn right here. And I'm just going to insert my right needle between the first and second stitch, going between the stitches, and then bringing my yarn around like to knit, and bring that loop through, but keep the first loop still on the left needle. And then I'm just going to bring my left needle under this new loop and slip it onto my needle. So that's one stitch cast on. Show you this a few more times. So put the needle between the first and second stitch, bring the yarn around to knit, bring your left needle under and slip it onto your needle. And you'll cast on as many stitches as the size that your knitting calls for. So I'm going to cast on 9. Let's see where we're at here. So there'll be kind of a little gap here. This first stitch here after the gap, that is not one of the cast on stitches. So you'll start counting after that stitch. So I have 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 stitches. Seven, 8, and 9. So once you have those cast on, we will purl all the way to the other end of our work, and then we'll cable cast on more stitches to the other side. So we're just going to purl these new stitches. The first one's usually a little tough to get into. Oops. Okay, I purled all my cast on stitches, and now I'm just going to purl to the end of my row, and then I'll show you how we cast on the other end. I finished my purl row, and now I'm just going to turn my work over so the right side is facing, and I'm going to cable cast on another 9 stitches. You'll cast on as many stitches as the size that your knitting calls for. So again, we'll just be going between the first and second stitch, bring the yarn around, and then bring your left needle under and slip that loop onto the needle. And just keep on going until you're all cast on, and then we'll just knit across the row and continue in stockinette stitch until the piece measures as long as the size your knitting calls for. And that's it. Once you finish knitting both panels of your t-shirt, we're going to seam it together. So I've just laid both panels together with the wrong side touching, and I'm going to start by seaming this top edge here. So for all sizes, we'll be seaming just a little bit at the end of the shoulder or end of the sleeves, and then another chunk at the shoulders, leaving a shoulder opening here and then a neck opening here. So for the medium size, I'm going to seam 3 stitches total here, and I've just kind of pinned this with a locking stitch marker. So I'm just going to seam these 3 stitches right here, leave a shoulder opening of 24 stitches, and then seam for another 5 stitches. And I'll do the same thing on this side as well. So the neck opening will be 40 stitches, but this will vary depending on which size you're making. Okay, so first we'll start by seaming these 3 stitches on the sleeve. Now, if you've left a little tail at the end of one of your panels, you can just use that to seam these first 3 stitches, and then you'll want to rejoin some yarn to seam this group of 5 stitches here. I'm just going to thread this on my yarn needle. There we go. Okay. And let's make sure this is going to focus. Okay. So if you're not aware, every knit stitch makes this little V. What we're going to do is connect the V on this half to the V on the bottom half. So my yarn's coming from what's kind of like my top half right now, and I'm just going to bring it through the center of the bottom edge V, the one right on the edge there. I'm just going to bring my yarn needle through the center of that V to get this started. And then I'm going to bring my yarn needle underneath both legs of a V and thread that through. And then I'm going to go back on this bottom part. I'm just going to follow where my yarn came from, that little hole there, and go under both of these legs. And that one's not going to be a V, that's more like an N. So kind of like the opposite of the top half. And don't pull this too tightly. You want to kind of match the same gauge as you're knitting. And then I'm going back to this side, going under both legs of a V. And then back to the bottom side, follow your yarn path right back through that same hole and go under both legs of an N. And I think we have one more to go here, one more stitch. So under both legs of a V for the top and the bottom. I'm just going to go straight back through the center of a V and bring my yarn through to the wrong side. Oops. And then at this point you can take out that stitch marker, and I will just be weaving in this end on the inside of my t-shirt a little bit here. And then I'll cut it and rejoin a yarn to seam the next part. Okay, we'll just leave that for now. So this part is done, and then now we want to do the same thing for this group of 5 stitches here. Again, I'm making the medium size. So I'm going to join another yarn. Thread that on my darning needle if I can. Come here. Okay. And we're going to do the same thing again. Let's see if I can focus this a little better. Okay. So I'm just going to come up from the bottom, from kind of inside the shirt, and go into a V. Leave a nice long tail so you can weave that back in when you're all done. And then I'm going to go under a V, under both legs of a V. And follow this yarn right back through that same hole it came from. Both legs of an N. And keep repeating. There's a V. So when I do these 5 stitches, I'll weave this yarn in and join another yarn for the other half of the shirt. Once you have the shoulder seamed, we're going to flip our piece upside down and seam the underarm in the same exact manner, going under the V's and seaming it to the other part. And then for the sides, we will be doing what's called the mattress stitch, which I think is the easiest of all the seaming that we'll have to do for this whole piece. Okay, let me zoom in here and I'll show you how we do that. So now we're just going to be seaming the sides together, like so, all the way down the length of the body and through the ribbing. Okay, so for this one, we're going to be going under the horizontal bar that runs between stitches. So again, we have our V's kind of on the side, and what we're going to do is pick up this horizontal bar between the first and second stitch of one side and bring our yarn through, and then same thing on the other side, leaving the space of one stitch. We're going to, you can kind of dig your needle in to find that horizontal bar. Make sure this is focused. So we go into a V and then find that horizontal bar that runs between the first and the second stitch, and bring your yarn through. And we'll keep going. Find the horizontal bar on this side, under that one, and you can do this kind of loosely and then tighten it up as you go. Let's see here. There it is. Pull that through. So I'm doing it kind of loosely, and then in just a minute I'll show you how we tighten that up. So we're basically just leaving one stitch on each side and going under the horizontal bar between the next stitch. Okay, so then we have kind of what looks like a little mini corset. And all we're going to do is take our working yarn and give it a gentle pull, not too tight, and that closes that up and gives it a nice seamless look. Just like so. And we'll just keep going. Look for that horizontal bar. I'm going in to a V and then picking up the bar. And then I'll just tighten that up again. And there we have it. So I'm going to seam the mattress, oops, sorry, all the way down and all the way through the ribbing. And then I'll seam up the other side.